There is a question about who is the true conservative in the race. And Governor Romney said only 9 years ago during an interview with New England Cable News, he said the following: "I think people recognize that I'm not a partisan Republican, that I'm someone who is moderate and my views are progressive." Do you believe Governor Romney now when he says that he is a man of constancy and that he'll stand up for conservative principles?
You know, I think this whole discussion so far has been very superficial. And I think the question, in a way, that you ask is superficial in that you're talking about character, which is very important. But I think we should deal with the issues as well. But I don't see how we can do well against Obama if we have any candidate that endorsed, single-payer systems and TARP bailouts and don't challenge the Federal Reserve's $15 trillion of injection bailing out their friends. I don't see how we can have anybody really compete with Obama who doesn't challenge this huge empire we have overseas and the overseas spending. I mean, this is how nations come down, is they extend themselves too far overseas. That's how the Soviets came down. We really have to talk about real cuts, and we haven't gotten around to this yet. So if we want to change things, this is what we have to talk about. Character is important and motivation is important. Our history is important. But I really consider that in the debate format to be less significant than what we really believe in.
I want to know what Ron Paul's plan of action will be to achieve getting the House and Senate to help him do all he's promised. And here's the record, Dr. Paul. You have actually sponsored 620 measures. Only 4 made it to a vote on the House floor, and only 1 has been signed into law.
You know, that demonstrates how much out of touch the U.S. government and the U.S. Congress is with the American people, because I'm supporting things that help the American people. That's the disgust that people have because they keep growing government, whether it's the Republicans in charge or the Democrats in charge. But as far as working with other groups, I think my record is about as good as anybody's, because I work on the principle that freedom and the Constitution bring people together for different reasons. People use freedom in different ways, like it does. It invites variations in our religious beliefs, in economic beliefs. We tell people that they're allowed to spend their money as they choose. On civil liberties, that's a different segment. Republican conservatives aren't all that well known for protecting privacy and personal liberties. And when it comes to this spending overseas, I can work a coalition. Matter of fact, my $1 trillion proposal to cut spending doesn't immediately deal with Social Security. It's to try to work our way out of Social Security. I'm cutting $1 trillion by attacking overseas spending and going back to 06 budget. And I do not believe that you have to have pain. People who have gotten special privileges and bailouts from the government, they may get the pain, but the American people, if they get their freedom back and get no income tax, they don't suffer any pain.
Senator Santorum, here's the reality. 2 previous presidents, President Bush talked about being a uniter and not a divider. President Obama talked about transforming Washington, and it hasn't worked. Washington is polarized, the country is polarized, and the American people are pretty sick of the fact that nothing gets done in Washington. Specifically, how do you change that?
Well, let me first address Congressman Paul, because the serious issue with Congressman Paul here is, you're right, he's never really passed anything of any import. And one of the reasons people like Congressman Paul is his economic plan. He's never been able to accomplish any of that. He has no track record of being able to work together. He's been out there on the margins and has really been unsuccessful in working together with anybody to do anything. The problem is that what Congressman Paul can do as commander-in-chief is he can, on day one, do what he says he wants to do, which is pull all our troops back out of overseas, put them here in America, leave us in a situation where the world is now going to be created huge amounts of vacuums all over the place, and have folks like China and Iran and others. Look at the Straits of Hormuz. As I said last night, we wouldn't even have the Fifth Fleet there. The problem with Congressman Paul is all the things that Republicans like about him he can't accomplish, and all the things they're worried about he'll do day one. And that's the problem. And so what we need to do is have someone who has a plan and has experience to do all the things Republicans and conservatives would like to do.
Let me get Dr. Paul to respond.
And then I'd like my opportunity to come back and answer your question.
It's not exactly a simple task to repeal approximately 100 years of us sliding away from our republic and still running a foreign policy of Woodrow Wilson, trying to make the world safe for democracy. And look, we have elections overseas and we don't even accept the elections. No, change in foreign policy is significant, but that's where a nation will come down if they keep keep doing this. We can't stay in 130 countries, get involved in nation building. We cannot have 900 bases overseas. We have to change policy. What about changing monetary policy? Yes, we do. But we've had that for 100 years. And right now, we're winning that battle. The American people now agree. About 75% of the American people now say we ought to audit the Federal Reserve, find out what they're doing, and who are their friends that they're bailing out constantly.
Congressman Paul, how do you feel about subsidies in general for a specific energy, and also, though, more specifically right now, more immediately, this low-income program, heating assistance program? Is this something that fits in under your view of what government does do or should not do?
Well, subsidies per se are, it's bad economic policy, it's bad moral policy because it's using government force to transfer money from one group to another, and economically it does a lot of harm. But when it comes to energy, we should, deregulate it like others talk about. But we need to talk, supply and demand. Everybody knows about supply and demand. They talk about oil, and if we had more alternative sources, that we always hope the prices will go down. But everybody forgets that there's 50% of a transaction is the monetary unit. And very few people talk about the supply and demand of money. And when you create a lot of money, prices go up. So it goes up in the areas where government most gets involved, in education and medical care, housing, and in energy. So prices go up much faster than any other place. So if you subsidize somebody and you print money to do it, you compound the problem. It's good politics. Yeah, I'm going to subsidize you and take care of you, but it's bad economic policy, and it's not a good way to find any answers.
Many Americans, particularly Democrats, believe that health care is a right. In your opinion, what services are all Americans entitled to expect to get from government?
Entitlements are not rights. Rights mean you have a right. Rights mean you have a right to your life, and you have a right to your liberty, and you should have a right to keep the fruits of your labor. And this is quite a bit different. But earlier on, there was a little discussion here about gay rights. I, in a way, don't like to use those terms: gay rights, women's rights, minority rights, religious rights. There's only one type of right. It's your right to your liberty. And I think this causes divisiveness when we see people in groups, because for too long we punish groups. So the answer then was, let's relieve them by giving them affirmative action. So I think both are wrong. If you think in terms of individuals and protect every single individual, no, they're not entitled. One group isn't entitled to take something from somebody else. And the basic problem here is there's a lot of good intention to help poor people, but guess who gets the entitlements in Washington? The big guys get the rich people. They run the entitlement system, the military-industrial complex, the banking system. Okay. Those are the entitlements we should be dealing with.
Dr. Paul, thank you. How would you use the bully pulpit?
I would continue to do what I'm doing now, preaching the gospel of liberty. I think that the most important ingredients in this country that made us great was our founders understood what liberty meant. And that is what we need. We have deserted that. We have drifted a long way. It involves our right to our life, right to our liberty. We ought to be able to keep the fruits of our labor. We ought to understand property rights. We ought to understand contract rights. We ought to understand what sound money is all about. And we ought to understand what national defense means. That means defending this country. That is the bully pulpit we need. We need to defend liberty.
Right. Defend liberty and?
And liberty.
Thank you.